Hi, this is Mike Dierks, Regional Missionary Coordinator of the Presbytery of Ohio. And today I'm interviewing Brad Peppo, who is the Regional Missionary of Miami Valley, which is kind of the southwestern part of Ohio. And Brad, tell us what's happened to First Street mission work.
The church formerly known as First Street is known so no longer. So we have been in our new building, I believe it's been 6 weeks now. So we closed on that at the end of July 30th, July 30th, and 2 days later, we're meeting for worship in there. And then it took us a lot longer to change our name than it did to move into the building. But after a lot of back and forth and thinking through what our ministry was about, what we hope to see develop out of that, we landed on Light of the Nations Orthodox Presbyterian Church. So a number of things have changed. I think as we talked about on previous interviews, we had already, from where we had been meeting on the west side of town, we had already established a relationship with a group of Turkish Muslims, and that interaction has continued. Actually, it's increased in a number of different ways. Whereas we had been meeting only by Zoom every 3 weeks. Our last meeting that we held was in person at my house, which was a great development, a big step that we had been looking forward to for a long time. I mean, there's one thing talking on Zoom, the other's just different when you're drinking Turkish tea together and talking about those things in person. Another really exciting development in that is that for the first time, one of the members of that community actually came and joined us. I believe it was our third week that we were in our building, joined us for worship. And that was very exciting. Another new development in that ministry is that our ladies are now working out, getting together for probably regular meetings, somewhat tracking like with what we do with the men for the Quran and Bible discussion. So again, that was something that we had in view for a while and hoped would develop. And actually, this Saturday morning is the first time that our ladies will be meeting with a number of their ladies. So in addition to that, we had our eye set on developing an English as a second language ministry. It would have been possible to do it from where we were before over on the west side, but the building location that we're now in is specifically, it's located in, the city is actually dedicated or designated that section of 3rd Street as the immigrant-owned business corridor. So it really is in the heart of Dayton's international community. And so with the Turkish ministry that we already had going, with the ESL ministry that we were hoping to develop, it really just looked like a good match of developing mission in place for us. And so our English as a second language ministry starts a week from tonight. We've done some neighborhood canvassing, visiting some of the grocery stores. There's an Arabic grocery store right down the street, a Mexican grocery store right down the street, and then a number of restaurants. And I had a lot of fun a few days back going and meeting some of those people and letting them know what we were doing with English. And we're waiting to see what happens, but a week from tonight, we'll know how many students we have. It could be none, it could be 100. We don't know. Okay, so we're looking forward to that.
Good. So tell us, you've got a really big building with multiple areas. How are you using that kind of beyond yourself to minister into the community? What else is going on in your building?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is sort of the deterrent for us as we were thinking about this building was just how much space it had and what we would do with it. And so the way we approached it was to think of it in 3 different sections. And for us as the church plant moving in, we thought primarily we'd be using the sanctuary and some rooms that were attached to that. There's 2 other wings. One is sort of some classrooms underneath the original sanctuary, which is now a gymnasium. And then there's an entire like 55 classroom educational wing on the other side. Right when we were considering moving in, I began talking with a couple of ministries with which we had some connection prior to. One is International Friendships Incorporated, which has representation in Columbus and a couple other cities. And we have 4 or 5 different college campuses here in the Dayton area. So they have multiple representations on those campuses. But it's an organization, a Christian organization that interact with international students coming into those universities and provide some community for them, but then also serves as a connection between those students and Christian families and Christian churches. And so we hosted the IFI training last month, and they had all their volunteers come for their kickoff for the year. And then one of the groups, the University of Dayton group, has now begun using our gymnasium every Friday night for their life group meeting. And I've been a part of that. I'm one of the volunteers there with them. So that's a relationship that we're looking forward to. We're actually looking very seriously also at the possibility of them having a permanent home-based office space in some of the room that we have. There's another ministry that we've known for a little while that we're talking with about using some space, and they're specifically a refugee focused ministry, and right now sort of on the northwest part of town, but looking for ways to enhance and expand what they're doing. And so we've given some tours to them and been in some conversations with them. So I think there's going to be plenty of activity in the building, and it's just all interesting how it all sort of has dovetailed into that specific that international outreach focus. So we think that the three ministries will be able to work well together.
That's neat. Yeah. So as somebody once told me, God opens doors, but they swing both ways. And sometimes nations that are cut off to the gospel, they're sending their people to our country. So it's an opportunity. God is opening the door for international ministry in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah, that's clearly what's happening.
Yeah, and that's great. Yeah. So as you think, I know the Turkish ministry has been kind of at the forefront. You got a story or two just to share that kind of gives insight into the relationship you guys have built?
Yeah. So again, the meeting to discuss the different Islamic or Christian ideas is sort of the core, the backbone of that relationship. But we've had lots of other things develop also, as far as meals at one another's houses. We've been invited to iftar dinners. They've come over here for meals. And it's not just sort of like formally organized things by the church and by the mosque. Individual families from each have gotten together from time to time. I think some of the most amazing stuff that we've experienced through this is some of the things that are said in those discussions. Just for example, the last meeting we had in person, we got onto the topic of assurance of salvation, which is something that's completely absent from Islam. In Islam, you have the idea that you try your best, you're going to fail, and in the end, it's just a matter of whether God decides to weigh your bad deeds less than your good deeds, or whether He just decides to have mercy. But very clearly articulated, no guarantee and no confidence. And so we were talking about the Christian doctrine of confidence, and emphasizing that it's because it's not about our works, but rather it's because it's rooted in God's promise that we can have this kind of assurance. And so we say, we believe what God says, and God says that if we put our faith and trust in Christ, then He'll save us. And so that's the ground of our confidence. And there was some back and forth on that, but then just this wonderful question. One of the men said, I hear Christians talk about this a lot. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand what your view is, and that it's different from Islam. He said, but I just have one question. He said, I just want to know, what does that feel like to have that assurance? And what better question can you get? And I said, it's awesome. I said, this is why it's good news. I mean, the peace you can have, the absence of fear that you can have because you're resting on God's promise. But I just thought, every once in a while, little windows like that open up, like that they're really thinking about this and wanting to know even what it would feel like, or what it would seem like from the inside to have this perspective. So I'm still hoping that future conversations will lead to more and more of those questions and more of those thoughts on their part. Very good.
Very good. All right. As we bring this to a close, how can the churches pray for you?
So with the Muslim ministry in particular, I would say the thing that we have been most hoping for, and is that there would be some, in addition to those kinds of questions that are being asked, that there would really be some understanding of the differences. I've said this before, but it seems like every time we get back together with them, we sort of reset to the default of, Christianity and Islam are the same. And we have to spend the whole time explaining how they're not and why the differences between them are not only there, but they're important. I've joked. I almost wish sometimes that they would get upset at something I'm saying, that it would make a dent, that they would really see this is different, and I'm forced with the decision between these two things. So I'm very thankful for how pleasant the conversations are, but just that the blinders would be taken off of their eyes.
Mhm.
The other thing I would ask for prayer for our ESL ministry. Mostly at this point, it's just sort of the fear of the unknown. How we don't know how many people. I think we've got 9 volunteers. So setting up different groups in different rotations, I think we'll be able to accommodate everyone one way or another. But just essentially the way you do it is you have your first night, everybody shows up, you assess everyone, and it's only at that point that you can determine here's what the groups are, here's what curriculum we need. And so you've got 1 week in between that first and second meeting to sort of make a lot of decisions. And so just prayer for that first night and that first week coming up. And especially and particularly that this would not just be an opportunity for us to offer the service to help people learn English, but it truly would lead to the kinds of gospel conversations and relational connections that we're hoping for in that immediate neighborhood, and maybe even a little more broadly out into the city. Those are the 2 big things that I would ask for prayer for.
Well, it sounds like also wise use on the building as you work with IFI and this refugee ministry, just knowing how best to use that building to really extend the gospel out through other organizations, but kind of bringing it back to light of the nations, which you definitely are living that name out.
We're striving to.
So
we're trying.
Praise God for that. All right. Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you for your time, and
You're welcome.
God bless.
My pleasure, Mike.